Let's talk about why I chosen a 12-year-old point-and-shoot camera in 2024 as my everyday camera. What I say is the best camera is the camera you got with you at all times, and this would be your smartphone. Your smartphone doesn't give you the same joy like a small camera or a big mirrorless camera or DSLR camera. So as I've been looking around for a small sized pocketable camera, I came across the Sony RX100, the original version, first time released in summer 2012, which makes this camera 12 years old in 2024. And with its specs of 1-inch sensor, 20 megapixel RAW files, a variable aperture of f1.8 down to 4.9 and the equivalent zoom range of 28mm up to 100mm, this camera seems pretty outdated in 2024. But let me tell you that this little pocket rocket camera still packs a lot of features and it was a lot of fun to use. Obviously, when you're looking for an everyday camera, size is one of the biggest factors if you ask me, because you want a camera always ready in your pocket, ready to shoot, and this little Sony RX100 definitely ticked the box. It's barely larger than my palm of my hand and it literally fits in any single pocket I can imagine. But I also wanted 100% manual flexibility to set my settings within a camera by myself, and the Sony actually still offers both of them, manual mode, aperture mode and any sort of program mode you can imagine. So it definitely ticked all the boxes in this case as well. When it comes down to the 1-inch sensor, a lot of people would like to try to avoid 1-inch sensor for the image quality, noise level you can get in a higher ISOs. However, I need to say that I was pleasantly surprised about the image quality and the dynamic range you can get out of a Sony RX100. Even though this camera is 12 years old, the image quality still holds nicely up in 2024. When it comes down to the zoom range, having a zoom range of 28mm up to 100mm gives you great flexibility and having a lot of variation for your given photographs. The aperture of f1.8 down to f4.9 was a bit of a drawback, that the aperture closes down to up to f4.9, but personally speaking, I didn't find it a big downside because I wanted to use it as an everyday camera. I wanted to use it as a point and shoot camera, and I wanted to use this camera as a memory maker. So I didn't pay attention too much to the aperture. Taking a photograph was more important than to choose what sort of aperture I can use. And when it comes down to the overall autofocus performance, for a 12-year-old camera, this autofocus performance is decently fast, and you even got eye autofocus available as well. And considering this camera is 12 years old, a point-and-shoot camera, having all features what modern cameras offer, such as like eye autofocus, is fantastic and good to have. And when you look at this tiny little thing, the battery of a Sony RX100, you wouldn't expect a really long battery life out of this camera, but the battery life is actually alright. It gives you a couple of hours of usage. It's always depending on how you got your camera set up as well. Do you got this display or the screen brightness turned down, battery safe mode on, and so on? So the battery life wasn't too bad for those tiny little batteries as well. I think it's been now 2 months with the Sony RX100 and no camera is perfect. You can have a greatest, best, newest camera, and even this camera won't be perfect. And this counts for older cameras as well. As an example, with the Sony RX100, because of its size and compact size, sometimes it was a bit hard to actually hold onto it because you don't have much grip going. So I actually taped some Velcro onto the camera to give me a bit more rough sort of grip that I'm actually be able to hold the camera. But also without a variable LCD screen, it was sometimes very hard to actually see my composition. Right now, if I wanted to take a bit of a lower shot, and I barely did see my LCD screen. Or when the sun was too bright outside, this LCD screen doesn't give you really much security when it comes down to your exposure, composition. You weren't really convinced that the photograph will come out alright. On the other hand side, thanks to its size, you can use this camera in certain moments in public where you would run into trouble with your big mirrorless camera. Did you ever run into the situation when you pulled out your big DSLR mirrorless camera and people approached you or security approached you and did ask you what you're doing, why you're taking photographs? This didn't happen with a small pocket size camera at all. So there are drawbacks and benefits to each camera. Overall, I need to say I quite enjoyed the process of Sony RX100 because it actually made me craft and work for my photographs. Sometimes I actually physically needed to go on my knees to take my photograph because I don't have an LCD flip screen. But this was a fun factor on this camera, an older camera which makes you work for your photograph or for the photo you want to take. Don't be fooled that you need the newest greatest tech as your everyday camera, as your camera in general. If you come across a 120-pound Sony RX1, I definitely recommend getting one because this camera is actually quite a lot of fun to use. So anyway, with that said, I hope you liked this video. Like, comment, subscribe, do all the good stuff. If you got questions, comments, let me know in the comments. And with that said, take care. I'm gonna see you in the next one.